behalf of the RMTAC team, I want to extend our thanks for all of you being here today as we kick off what is our session one of a two-part learning community series. This one will be titled Challenges to Socialization and Behavioral Health Misdiagnosis in Newcomer Health. Uh, we're excited at the RMTAC program to begin this session with you. And with that, let me introduce myself. My name is Ruben Ramos. I have the privilege of managing our strategic partnerships and a very esteemed advisory board at RMTAC. And I'm thrilled to kick things off today and hopefully set the stage for what I hope is an exciting and engaging session for all of you. You can see that our agenda is fairly dynamic and robust. We'll start with introductions, including an opportunity for all of you to tell us who you are, what organization or agency you're associated with. Um, we'll set the stage for our SMEs and hopefully engage in a panel discussion with them that leads to an opportunity for further questions and shared insights from them. Now, we're not going to have any formal breaks, so if you need to take a moment, go grab a bottle of water or whatnot, just feel free to step away and then just come back on and re-engage with us. And so with all of those housekeeping items behind us, let's transition to the introduction of our subject matter experts today. Uh, we are absolutely, these are our subject matter experts. Meet them. We are absolutely thrilled to have these incredible experts join us for today's session. Their insights, their experience, their knowledge as you read their vitas will spark, I think, some interesting conversations and provide some, I think, insightful perspectives for all of us to learn, to engage, and hopefully we will continue to be inspired with such relevant work. So thank you to our SMEs that you see here. These are the two ladies that make it all happen. You know, they're a little humble, but I'm going to call them out. You know, while things just seem to maybe fall in place for these learning communities that we're getting pretty good at, it's the dedication of these two young ladies that you see their photographs here that work tirelessly behind the scenes to prepare us to ensure that everything runs smoothly and efficiently, that we're all dressed the right way, they all look the right way, and all of that. So keep these two ladies' names in mind if you experience any kind of technical difficulties. You know, these are the two ladies that can address them. And so don't hesitate to reach out via the chat and ask Diana and Sonia to help you with any technical difficulties. We're going to try to focus in four key areas. The first one would be strengthening collaboration. I'm really big on this one, particularly with my charge at RMTAC. Our collective knowledge is our greatest asset. And so by working together, we can create, I believe, a stronger and more effective solution to the challenges that we face, particularly at this time, at this moment in our country. Gaining insight through expert-led discussions. I don't know. This is all for me, and my colleagues know this. I'm in new territory here as it relates to behavioral health in general and behavioral health for refugees and migrants specifically, and to just have a deepened understanding from experts who lead the conversation with me is helpful to me. And then we always want to have from these learning communities actionable takeaways. What action plan or what actionable takeaway do we take from this learning community? One of those focuses today is what we'll learn from our SMEs, misdiagnosis in behavioral health, which is a critical concern, particularly when trauma is involved and how these youth adapt to stress. And so we're going to talk to that and potential ways to provide adequate care in that context. So that all being said, you know, I'm going to now introduce you to Dr. Noura. Meet Dr. Noura. What a wonderful photograph of Dr. Noura here. Dr. Noura is based in New York City. Frankly, I will share with everyone that her vision and dedication to RMTAC played a key role and inspired my teammates to create and develop the theme for today's learning community. Her insights were invaluable and it kind of shaped our agenda for today. And we're excited to share more. So Diana and Sonia, without any further delay, let's transition to Dr. Noura's video, please.
Hello, is Dr. Noor Abdul Karim, and I am a licensed psychologist. And today I'd like to speak about fostering belonging, supporting integration of newcomer, refugee, and migrant youth. I'd like to start off by speaking about why it's important for us to know how to foster this belonging. Why is this topic important? This topic is important because as behavioral health providers, we want to ensure that we are providing care that supports the mental health of migrant youth, that celebrates and accepts their identity, and that makes them feel fully included within society. Without knowing how to do this, it's possible that we as behavioral health providers may actually end up inflicting harm unintentionally because we may end up using inclusive practices that are actually harmful to migrant youth. One adaptation adjustment process that is used with some immigrants is called assimilation. Now, assimilation is a process that has had iterative definitions in the United States. So initially, assimilation was defined as immigrants come to America and they are expected to transition into the mainstream American society. The definition evolved still that they adopt American cultural traits and that they seek out the acceptance of native-born Americans. The thought is this is the only way that immigrants can socially and economically advance through assimilation. Now, assimilation has been found to be a very harmful process because it would be asking that the migrant youth give up who they are, give up their identity. Studies have shown that assimilation has led to psychological distress for immigrants. This is a process that we should not be pushing onto migrant youth, and this should not be the goal. A process that has been found to be more effective and healthier is the process of integration. And so when integration is done correctly, it looks like full economic inclusion, social inclusion, cultural inclusion, and the ways that this can show up for immigrant youth is that they are included in peer activities. Another thing to consider is socialization. So socialization is the way we learn about values, norms, and behaviors that are fitting of society. And it influences our personality as well as our behaviors. And there are different types of socialization that we can ask about. There's parental socialization, peer socialization, and then ethnic cultural socialization. So ethnic cultural socialization or ethnic racial socialization is socialization or messaging related to topics of culture, such as how can a migrant youth cope with discrimination? What are the types of messaging that they receive regarding cultural pride? What is the type of messaging that they receive about their cultural history? And they can be receiving this messaging both from their parents as well as from their peers. And socialization can also help with facilitating integration and a sense of belonging for immigrant youth. Now, without socialization, without integration, this can lead to negative impacts. So if a immigrant youth does not receive, for example, any parental socialization, this can also leave them to feeling generally unprepared because they're not receiving any messaging on how to cope with discrimination experiences that they may experience. They're not learning any messages on how to navigate the difficulties of the challenges that immigrants face and the privileges that citizenship receives. So without integration, the immigrant youth may end up feeling just very left out. They might also experience a lot of language barriers and legal barriers and discrimination and racism and not knowing how to deal with it. And a lack of integration can also lead to them just struggling, adjusting to norms and values, which can directly cause psychological distress and can lastly lead them to experiencing an identity crisis because the immigrant youth will not know how to reconcile their immigrant identity with what they think their American identity is. They won't know how to integrate the two into one or know how to hold both together. So it's very important for us to ensure that socialization is within the lives of migrant youth as well as integration. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you to Dr. Hope you all enjoyed Dr. Noor's video. Such important themes and messaging that she provided to us there. Again, thanks to Dr. Nora. Now let me introduce another one of our subject matter experts this afternoon, Dr. Beal. Now, Dr. Beal serves as one of RMTAC's clinical consultants. She joins us from sunny California. Hope it's sunny in California today. She brings extensive expertise in educational and behavioral support across a good number of contexts, as you can see here in her bio. So we're excited to have Dr. Beal share her insights with us today. And without any further delay, Dr. Beal.
Thank you, Ruben, and thank you to Dr. Abdul Karim. She made some really valid points. Highlighting these points can be effective in minimizing harm to our youth. In thinking about fostering belonging, how do we balance between encouraging parents to effectively socialize while respecting their personal perspectives? I think it's vital to understand that providers can absolutely shape environments that foster belonging, but we cannot rewrite systemic histories or family narratives. If we can remember this, then we can hold space for honoring why families may be hesitant or resistant to socialization. An example here might be corroborated with Dr. Abdul Karim's statement on assimilation. We may all be familiar with this process and be expected to socially accept it, but pushing against these norms may prove to be advantageous for our immigrant youth in support of integration. We have to set realistic expectations. We can influence, but we cannot control how these immigrant youth internalize socialization experiences. We want to stay mindful of this. We can honor each immigrant youth and their families' individual and collective journeys while also supporting adaptive social behaviors in new cultural contexts. This may look like acknowledging adverse experiences while identifying ways that we can promote psychological safety in these new environments. We can recognize or acknowledge the importance of advocating for systemic change, such as inclusive school policies, while working with our local spheres of impact. I like to call this trench work. It can be hard not to take on the burden of social justice, but if we can remember to stay grounded in humility, it might make our support more impactful. Our role is to facilitate, not provide corrective or punitive consequences. So, when we're considering our roles as support providers, I like to consider how our own experiences and biases may contribute to the way that we're working collaboratively. Again, if this is at the forefront of our motivations, then fostering healthy support and collaborations can be in alignment with those values and, again, minimize harm. So, some things to consider here are the importance of how support and collaboration between providers can be achieved. When we're centering behavioral health, one's needs are complex and layered, thus requiring a multidisciplinary lens. There is no one provider that can carry it all. We can encourage shared ownership of support through consistent communication, not just crisis collaboration. And this can look like proactive support as well as reactive strategies. This process may entail engaging in critical conversations that may be uncomfortable as we promote listening sessions. We can utilize strength-based language to help frame these conversations, and we can also co-create goals so that families are active participants in the socialization process. We can create spaces where providers can exchange perspectives without hierarchy. We can use cross-discipline collaboration to reduce behavioral health misdiagnoses that stem from cultural misinterpretation or limited context. And finally, we can advocate for integrated systems of care that center the immigrant youth and family and not just siloed agendas or competing priorities. And finally, to deepen our understanding of identifying different types of providers in immigrant youth socialization circles, let's break down who these service providers are and practical ways that they can promote collaboration. So we have school counselors, and they are often the first to notice behavioral changes or engagement in their environments, and they can help bridge academic and social emotional domains. So an example of this may be to implement culturally responsive screening tools that really assess social emotional health while respecting migration history and cultural norms. We have primary care providers who can monitor physical health but can miss behavioral nuances without behavioral health insight or direct observation. This absolutely doesn't negate their value, as they are often a trusted resource for families. So, using a brief, culturally sensitive behavioral health screener, such as the Refugee Health Screener 15 during well visits, may help with this. We have external mental health providers who can bring depth to trauma responsive care, but they may lack context on academic and family dynamics. So, establishing regular communication loops with school counselors and teachers, with consent, of course, to understand academic stressors and peer dynamics. We have faith leaders or cultural mentors who are sometimes overlooked but can be deeply influential in an immigrant youth identity or their social values. So, inviting faith and cultural leaders to participate in community wellness panels or school discussions may help position them as vital allies in youth well being. And finally, we have educators and coaches who may have daily contact, which allows for real time modeling of what social norms and peer integration looks like. And an example of this may look like modeling inclusive classroom and team norms. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Beal, and also Dr. Noor and her video. Really appreciate this expert insight into just in that last slide, that the collaboration is really required to make the kind of impact that we need on our on this cohort youth. But again, thanks to both of you, Dr. Beal and Dr. Noor. Your obviously your experience and knowledge in this arena help as we move along this learning community. Okay, now we'd like to hear from our participants in the learning community now. So as we move forward through the session, we're going to take a moment, complete a poll. We're going to make it easy again for you. Your responses will provide us a little bit of in-depth insight into what you're doing in your world, help us shape the discussion as we prepare for some breakout sessions, and really would encourage you all to think a little bit about what this question entails. What challenges do migrant youth face in socializing and integrating? Dr. Beal touched a little bit on that in her slide presentation, but I would ask you all to think about localizing this question for your community and the folks that you work with. So there's your QR code, and feel free to opine and provide us your valuable feedback here on this question. Language barriers for sure. We learned very quickly when we launched the RMTAC program that language and the challenges, again, across different places throughout the world as it relates to migrants and refugees in the US, was going to be a challenge for us. Trauma and trauma-informed care also came out in our initial assessment of needs. Isolation. Excellent. Really good feedback. Really good feedback. Yeah, I think in particular, we've seen a lot of some of our service providers reach out to us in terms of managing trauma across, the parents, the teenage kids, and then the younger kids in the family. It is a traumatic situation for the entire family. And then, of course, yeah, understanding the U.S. population, that's a challenge for all of us. Excellent, just excellent feedback. Excellent feedback here. Thank you very much for everyone engaging in that. Wow, really good. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone, for sharing your thoughts in and your input in that. I'd like to now move our presentation forward and welcome one additional subject matter expert this afternoon, Dr. Perez. We're thrilled to have you, Dr. Irma Perez. As you review her background here on this slide, it's worth noting, at least for me, that Dr. Perez resides in the upper Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And those of you that know about the Rio Grande Valley know the difference between the upper and the lower Rio Grande Valley. But she brings that Rio Grande Valley area, very unique perspective to our conversation this afternoon in the context of what happens from Brownsville all the way to McAllen. And so with all of that said, Dr. Bettis, let's dive into a discussion on the challenges to youth integration and socialization from your perspective. Dr. Bettis, thank you for being with us.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be able to talk with you all and discuss the challenges that I've observed in my experience working with the immigrant population. I think they hit it right on the nail when they talked about the challenges. The first and foremost that came up was the language barriers, right? The isolation that these immigrants face, when they first get here, just understanding the new language for our immigrant population can lead to social isolation. It's difficulty accessing that education, healthcare, employment for the parents. It's very difficult for them to acquire that language, those classes. And even when they do, a lot of the refugee camps really don't, foster or focus on helping them learn that language, right? So they struggle. We see a lot of the kids, even when they're in the shelter setting, they learn and they do their best at learning the language and English, and that some of them do so well. But yet, when they do, and they are, you know, reunited with family members in their countries, whether it be California, Oregon, here in Texas or out of Texas, they do often feel pressured, they're bullied, they're made fun of because of that struggle with that language barrier. All of that leads to that social isolation and that inability to create those connections with their peers in the classroom. It also takes away from building or feeling a sense of belonging, especially if they're experiencing like discrimination and prejudice. They're more likely to isolate. And then, we know that leads to anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression. Economic hardship, that is another thing that is something that's really big and then experienced by our immigrant population. The lack of work skills when they're here, qualifications in the new country that they travel to really makes it difficult for them to find any kind of employment. And of course, that makes it hard for them to be able to financially support their families and the children. And again, it has that trickling effect. Um, the discrimination and prejudice is another big thing, because unfortunately, the immigrant population, from my experience and working with immigrants that have not only in a shelter setting, but that have now been reunited with family members and are now seeking external services, they talk about the discrimination and the bias that they feel not only from their peers, but sometimes teachers, other members of the community, and that in itself impacts their self-esteem, that sense of belonging, so it's difficult. I think another thing is the family dynamics, to understand like how they might even feel that from the parents expecting them to maintain their culture, but yet they're trying so much to fit in with the classroom, and with their new identified peers. And so there's that struggle there too. So the family dynamics also impacts them. And then of course, the access to resources, what type of resources are being provided to them in the community and in the school setting. I know a lot of the children, and one of the concerns that I've also worked with, like I said, children that have now been reunited is, yes, once they're placed in a school setting, they are placed in the English as second language classes, but they really don't get the additional help they need to learn the English. So that also, again, impacts their self-esteem, their ability to even seek the resources that they need, because again, they're unable to communicate their needs. So that really limits the resources that are available to them. I think that all of these have demonstrated to be very important and some of the things that challenge the children. Again, we talked about the discrimination and prejudice, the family dynamics, the access to resources, and even like let's talk about access, going back to access to resources like the basic health care, your nutrition, your psychologist, psychiatric, those kind of support services. Another one was that I found interesting was, those um, the fear of immigration and enforcement now, especially now, is also a really big thing that the immigrant population are feeling more, and that's very traumatic for them. So I think it's really, really important that we understand these challenges that the youth and the immigrant population are experiencing so that we're able to start to work and address them. On the slides prior to this one, I did implement some really interesting articles that can really give you some more insight into, you know, the conceptualization and resilience that we need to consider among these refugees and immigrant youth. Also, the effects of the economic hardship, the culture and adaptation. So all of these are really good. Like Mr. Ramos said, all of these slides will be sent to you also. I really, especially as providers in shelter settings, these are really, really good to read and to give you just a little more insight as to how they are impacting our immigrant population, and yet how these are also being manifested into the behaviors that you all are dealing with on a one-to-one basis. So it's really, really important to take into consideration that. Again, like I said, additional ones are that fear of immigration and the trauma from the journey, the trauma from abuse, neglect, the gang violence in home country. All of those are very, very important aspects that are important and need to be dealt with, and work with the clients when working, again, specifically with this population.
Thank you, Dr. Bettis. Uh, as we're going to move into breakout sessions here, but as we move into these small breakouts, let's keep in mind the unique challenges that Dr. Bettis just shared with us as it relates to newcomer youth. The language barriers, she spoke to that, the cultural differences, the isolation, all of these which have a deep impact in their mental well-being. And so thank you, Dr. Bettis, for bringing that up, kind of setting the tone, setting the stage for, I'm hoping, some very engaging breakout sessions. This will, I hope, give us an opportunity to explore solutions. I want everybody to feel comfortable. There's no wrong answers. Your input is valuable. It will strengthen our collective support for these newcomer youth. And so we're now going to move into breakout sessions. Now, don't get, no stress here. There's not going to be a test or anything, but it does allow us to break out into smaller groups, right? Each group will have an assigned facilitator, an SME or subject matter expert facilitator, and there will also be a producer who will take notes. So you don't necessarily have to be, scribe, there need not be the need for a scribe, and there will be a producer who will take notes on screen for you. I will ask that as you go into the breakout groups, pretty quickly, you'll identify someone that you think will be an appropriate spokesperson for your group. Hopefully we won't get into any battles about that, but try to select a spokesperson early on in your conversations so that when you come back to the broader group, we can have, group one, who's your spokesperson, and have a report out on the key takeaways from the session. Hey, thanks everybody I've heard a little bit of feedback, very active participation in our breakout activity. Thank you everybody for engaging, and let's just, before we get to the first group one spokesperson, I'm queuing you up, whoever you are. Let's just take a few moments to reflect. what was your key takeaway from the activity? Did anything that was discussed, was anything with a shift maybe in something that you thought or had a certain understanding in one way, and now because of this engaging roundtable discussion, you're coming away with a different perspective, so to speak? Uh, and also, as Dr. Bettis shared with us, with the cohort youth in mind, knowing their unique and very personal journeys and stories, has anything potentially changed in your perceptions of that cohort? So that all being said, again, there's no right or wrong answers in the feedback, but I would like to encourage and hear from Group One, the Group One spokesperson. Share your thoughts, share your group's thoughts, and let's keep everybody's perspective in mind, and value their perspective. So, Group One spokesperson, if you can, Diana, unmute, or if Group One spokesperson can unmute themselves, please share with us how your Group One session went.
Good afternoon. So some of the insights that were gained during this activity, we did make assumptions based on what we had known about the child. A lot of the assumptions, some of them were kind of on point, but then of course, once we get more information on the child, our thought process did change a lot. What changes did we notice in our perceptions? So again, it did shift. We would see some type of behaviors and we would automatically assume it was for one thing. But of course, seeing the second part of the scenario, we were able to identify why the child might be acting a certain way or might be showing certain behaviors.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Can we now move to Group Two? Group Two spokesperson, would you please unmute your line and share with us your thoughts, and how did Group Two respond to these two questions on the roundtable discussion slide?
Yes. Hello. So some of the insights that we gained, I think our assumptions were they weren't that far off. For example, for the first case study, we did acknowledge the language barrier, which is actually one of the challenges that the teenager was going through. After learning a little bit more about the teenager and their background, we learned that she was a refugee. So well, that comes with traumas, right? So we now know why she was behaving the way that she was behaving. It could be, and also one of my team members mentioned the fact that it could be that the activity per se that they were engaging in might have triggered her. It could be the subject of the activity, or someone mentioned something that triggered her. And also the one that I think it was the second case study, the one where we were discussing a male teenager, his behavior in the classroom. I think that at first we were taking it as, oh, okay, so he's a teenager, he's a 16-year-old, he's defiant, maybe, right? It also could be cultural, like he's refusing to speak to the teacher, and maybe that's why he wants to speak to the principal only. But then afterwards, we learned that since he's from a high socioeconomic status, and having a record of being in a private school, it could be that he wasn't feeling challenged in the classroom, and we came up with maybe we could validate him and provide him with some testing so that we could place him in a higher level class that would challenge him and, help him out with that.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was excellent. Excellent feedback. I should have mentioned this before I recognized the Group One spokesperson during these breakout sessions, because some folks rolled in a little bit tardy and at the very end of our adjournment from the breakout session. What we do is we throw out multiple scenarios for the group session to engage in. And so that's what these spokespersons are describing, how they looked at each one of these scenarios, and then as a group brought their perspective, their experience, and their knowledge to bear on on how to address each one of the different scenarios. So just a little context there for you. Okay, group or spokesperson for group number 3, please unmute your line and share with us what came out of your conversation with these different scenarios that were presented to you. Group 3.
Okay, I want to say that that's me. So for group 3, we had some pretty productive conversations. Ms. Chapa did a great job at facilitating, as well as Dr. Bettis was a great SME. I think a lot of the conversations that we had and insight that we gained was, being mindful of every situation and understanding that every child goes through different things. So whether one person believes that a child does have, there's a culture issue going on, a language issue going on, we just at the end of the day have to be really understanding of what they're going through, because not every child, we can't conform every child to like just one shoe, right? Everyone is different. I think some of the perspectives that we gained in our conversation, for example, we did have some male perspective about possible like the machismo, right? That maybe some of the clients in the case scenarios, their version of authority is not necessarily a female. It could be a male, and that goes back to culture, right? But overall, I think it was great case scenarios that brought a lot of, like I said, constructive feedback and conversations.
Thank you, Ms. Salinas. Excellent. Thank you, Group 3. And to close out, no pressure at all, Group 4 spokesperson, but usually the last group can kind of really wrap it up and share some meaningful dialogue and impressions that came out of your group. So Group 4 spokesperson, please unmute yourself and share with us what came out of your conversation with Group 4. Do we know who the spokesperson was, ladies?
That's Danielle's group.
Yeah, we didn't. I forgot to appoint someone. We just jumped right into the conversation. So if someone would be willing to chime in on your thoughts about our discussion, that would be great.
So, okay, we talked about obviously not being presumptuous. That was the number one thing. And we noticed the language. It's kind of very important to understand the cultural context, the backgrounds of these kids that you're dealing with. One of the clinicians mentioned something that was new to me, but interesting, and that was being mindful of the developmental stages. And he mentioned Erickson's developmental stages. Besides that, we found that cultural humility was very effective when dealing with individuals and not using language that was judgmental or presumptuous.
We also mentioned about how religion can be one factor that can impact how that individual interact with clinician or therapist. I just wanted to add that.
Important add. Thank you. Thank you. Group 4, excellent. Wow. But really, my thanks to everyone in each one of the four breakout sessions. We have found that those smaller breakouts are very productive because it just allows different voices to opine. We can't do it with the larger group, but in those breakout sessions, there is utility to it. So thank you all very much for your active participation in the breakout sessions. We're going to move now back to Dr. Perez. And Dr. Perez is now going to guide us in a discussion on supporting the integration of our cohort youth. Dr. Perez, I want to keep on time here. So the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ramos. I actually had a really great time in those groups, because it really allowed to see everybody that's here and talk about the different perspectives. I'm going to go right into contributing factors of misdiagnosis in refugee migrants and the newcomer youth. Talk a little bit about the cultural differences, the misinterpretation of behaviors, those structural barriers that are experienced, and then the psychological trauma and those related barriers as well. So we go into to the cultural differences. One of the things that I thought was really important is to look at the conceptualization of mental illness, right? How is mental illness conceptualized in these populations, at home, within the family, within the home countries? You know, we talked about in our group about, you know, the children from Honduras and El Salvador, as opposed to the children from Guatemala and their perspectives and you know the way they hold themselves, the way they carry themselves. So I think it's really important to talk about the conceptualization of mental illness. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about was individualism versus collectivism. So what that basically means is like individualism. This is one of those things where the family promotes that children that they be self-reliant, that they be independent, and they're more likely to view their own well-being over the good of the group, right? As opposed to a collectivism approach, which is that the children be obedient and they have to fulfill the duties to their families, and you know they might have to sacrifice their comfort for the greater good of their family members, right? So it's important to take in that conceptualization of individualism versus collectivism. The other one is the illness versus the disease model. Again, we want to talk about how, you know, the illness is more of a subjective experience. It's more of that feeling unwell, like, you know, it encompasses all the individuals, like their mental and physical sensations, you know, how their experiences are. So, you know, for example, some youth might experience anxiety and depression, and that is manifested very differently in adults and in children and in migrant youth, right? Because they might start to exhibit like physical symptoms. They might be fatigue, restless, you know, and all of this is associated with that, with their journeys, the acculturation, and just a combination of both physical and psychosocial factors. The disease model, on the other hand, refers to, it's more objective and it's biological, and it's basically that the abnormalities are more associated with just an illness that can be diagnosed by medical professionals. So just looking at the conceptualization of mental illness, I think it's very important as us mental health providers to look at how the child, the family conceptualizes mental illness. And these are just some of the cultural differences. See, the others are, and in this one, I wanted to talk a little bit about a case that I had. And this one actually will fall under how cultural differences, structural barriers, and psychological trauma and related barriers all can impact youth. I did have the opportunity to work with a child that was having severe mental health issues. Um, he was actually sent here to the US because at home he was experimenting hallucinations, you know, hearing voices, and the family just couldn't understand his misbehaviors, the odd behaviors that he was demonstrating. They saw it as a lack of respect, and he was actually getting over disciplined by family members and abused because they didn't understand it, nor did they have the access to those resources, talking about structural barriers. And that the way that they looked at this case, it was, they don't see mental health as an issue. And so when he comes here, he's continuing to demonstrate those behaviors. But then fortunately, here we had some really good clinicians that reached out, sought out those external services. And once we were able to start looking at the background, looking and, talking with family members in home country, which was the caregiver there that really had a genuine desire to help this child, we started to look at, when did the symptoms start, what they were seeing, and being able to conceptualize it. Working again, this was something that I staffed and worked with I collaborated with my supervisor, clinicians. I think one of the subject matter experts talked about how we can't do this alone. This is not something that we do alone, that we need to seek these outside resources to be able to help them in a holistic view, to provide that holistic view of what's actually happening. So, come to find out that he met the criteria for those schizophrenia. And as we started to look more into it, then we started to see how it was that we could help him. So it was really, really important to take into consideration all of those factors. Again, some of the structural barriers that I wanted to talk about was if we don't have access to resources, then a lot of times the children will go undiagnosed, never treated, and the symptoms will exacerbate if they're not treated, as opposed to if they receive the right treatment, the right interventions, there's more of a positive, an increased potential for positive outcomes, right? The last one was psychological barriers and trauma-related issues. And those are some of the issues that the children experience, right? The fear of deportation, post-traumatic stress disorder, the mistrust of the systems, right? And adjustment disorders. This, I did have another quick example that I thought was really, really important. I did have a young child that was about 11 years old, and she did really well. And after about a month or so of being in care, she stopped eating, and she was not eating her 3 meals a day. And right away, it's like she's being non-compliant. She's, she's depressed. There were just so many assumptions and so many perspectives coming around. And when I was able to actually sit her down and talk to her alone and just give her time to talk to me, turns out that she had stopped eating those last 3 days because she had gotten bad news about her case status, felt that she was gonna be deported, and she forgot what it was like to be hungry. And that just really hurt my heart because it's like, wow, those are the kinds of things that we really need to take into consideration when we're looking at the needs of the client. And it's a lot about not reacting to the behaviors, but responding to their needs, responding to the needs of other children and how we can work with them. So again, just the misinterpretation of these behaviors and how it can cause inappropriate treatment. It can cause delayed or prevented access to healthcare and an increased risk for negative outcomes. So some of the cultural syndromes that I did review would be the Ulysses syndrome, which is also known as the immigrant syndrome. And this is a syndrome that refers to psychosomatic conditions experienced by individuals who migrate, especially those who are facing like extreme stress and hardship. And it's characterized by physiological and psychological symptoms from chronic stress, and somatic symptoms, that nervousness, the headaches, insomnia, fatigue, appetite loss, and also some ill-defined and discomfort. Some other syndromes were the cultural bound syndromes, right? And these are just like these are behaviors and symptoms that are unique to certain cultures, right? They're not easily recognized and understood by cultures outside of their culture, right? And they can be manifested differently, including physical, psychological, and behaviorals, and they may be attributed to different causes. Some may cause new supernatural, spiritual causes, I'll go over just a quick one. The first one is el ataque de nervios, right? That a lot of Hispanics report, that they have this out of conscious feeling, and that it might be from evil spirits. They might have episodes of crying, uncontrollable shouting, or physical aggression. And a lot of times these are often associated with stressful events that they experience, So different cultural groups experience these syndromes. And this is why it's very, very important that as mental health professionals become aware of the population that we're serving and really look and educate ourselves so that we are able to provide more of an insightful therapeutic approach. Some of the approaches that things that we need to take into consideration are those cultural considerations. Again, for a lot of the population from Central America, what we're seeing is that mental health is seen as a weakness. It's even shameful to some of the families, you know, it's not a real problem. Or a lot of the, you know, when I talk to some of the clients that I work with now in the shelter settings, like, yo no estoy loca, miss, yo no estoy loca. And it's like, no, 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 just because I'm here doesn't mean that you're crazy. I'm here to help. We're here to see how we can help you. What's happening? Let's talk a little bit about it. But that stigma really prevents them from seeking resources outside because it's not the norm for them, and it's actually frowned upon for them. And then you have, again, those cultural traditional beliefs, the alternative approaches, herbal remedies, spiritual practices, that sense of we can deal with it within our own family. We're not going to look outside to anybody else. Like, you know, I don't know how many times I've heard it, even from my own family members. When we were little, all we needed was a spanking, or all we needed was this. It's like, no, no, let's be realistic. And so, again, as mental health providers, cultural consideration and cultural competency is very, very important in order for us to provide the most important and the most appropriate interventions for the youth that we serve. So the role of cultural competency in this integration is understanding and ensuring that we have effective and equitable care. Self-awareness, are we aware? Do we know a lot about that population? If not, acquire that cultural knowledge. I think that as I continue to grow as a psychologist and working with complex cases, I get the opportunity to do research and say, okay, why is this happening? And it really just, knowledge is power. And it just, okay, no wonder this is happening. This is what I'm seeing. With every case, I feel that I grow, right? So you want to develop those relevant skills. You want to engage in those cultural encounters and be mindful when you work with those children. I don't know much about that. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like in your country or in your family. You know, what are some of the expectations that they have of you? Because that's allowing them to educate you on them. Remember, they are the experts on them. We are just coming into their world. So we want to engage in those cultural encounters, and we want to possess the desire to be culturally competent. I want to be able to work with this client, so I'm going to learn a little bit more about him, right? And what happens when we become more culturally competent? Where our communication skills increase tremendously as far as with that client, you know. We have enhanced engagement. The client feels that empathic understanding. What is that? Carl Rogers, unconditional positive regard, right? They now feel like, hey, she honestly cares. She really has a desire to help me. She wants to know about what's happening, right? We reduce those health disparities because a lot of times when they have somebody they can turn to, they'll be like, no, I want to talk to this person. She's been helping me. Okay, let's do that. Let's work with them. Let's meet them where they're at. And then we want to increase the trust in the healthcare system. Not everybody's out to get them. Not everybody's out to diagnose them and stigmatize them, right? So we really want to make sure that we understand the importance of cultural competency in assisting in the integration of these children. Some of the approaches that we can talk about, I really wanted to talk about these. I'm going to go through them quickly because I know we're running out of time, but some of the cases that that have happened in the past is there's the Sharif robbers case, and this happened, and it was an experiment conducted in Oklahoma in 1954. And so this was experiments because they were seeing how intergroup conflict arise from like a scarce of resources, right? And then they talked about how this conflict often arises when when there's a competition for limited resources. So what they created were called superordinate goals, where they resolved the conflict between this group of boys by identifying a goal that they had to work on together in order to complete a task. So they had to put their differences aside in order to work together to complete the superordinate goal. And so what the experiment showed was that that initially the competition that they had for those scarce resources, it led to hostility and prejudice. but this was reduced when they were forced to work together to achieve a common objective. Another project that was also experiment that was conducted by Elliot Aronson in the 1970s, and this aimed at addressing racial conflict and reducing those negative stereotypes, right? And so the purpose was to foster a more inclusive and cooperative learning environment, and fight the effects of racial segregation by promoting empathy, understanding, inclusivity, right? So they did what they called it was called the jigsaw classroom. And so each day involved students working in small groups. They were all diverse, these children, and each member became an effort of a different part of the topic and the task that they had to complete. So these children were dependent on one another to be able to complete that project and really gain insight. The results of these experiments demonstrated that this type of jigsaw classroom led to reduced biases, increasing the likelihood of liking school, and even improved test performance. So I just wanted you to see that these are some of the things that have been implemented. I mean, we're talking from 1954 to 1970s, how these are some of the projects and experiments that have led to positive integration. And then some other ones are the strength-based approaches. We want to work on leveraging their strengths, focus on the resiliency, and not focus on their limits. We want to utilize, again, their existing strengths, demonstrate cultural humility, provide empowerment, and those supportive relationships. The other the approaches that I went ahead and want to talk just very basically about, and these are just a little bit about what we all shared in introduction and in the groups that we talked about, the breakout groups, the trauma informed approach, right? And so recognizing what trauma looks like across various cultures, respecting those cultural values and practices, tailoring those interventions to the cultural context, individualizing them, again, showing an interest in the child, what their expectations are, their perspectives are, so that we can meet them where they're at and then provide some positive interventions, right? Creating that safe environment and building those trusting relationships. Other things are now is, again, I have been afforded the opportunity to now work with immigrant youth, not only in shelter settings, but now once they are integrating into the school systems, right? And so I think it's really important that we promote community-based initiatives, right? Legal housing and general support, after schools programs that might help these children as they continue to learn the English language, organizing social events, maybe group events that might foster this integration, fostering those connections, promoting belonging and reducing the stigma, and then encourage these recovery participation, encourage, that it not just be the child that attend, rather that the whole family attend. And then another one is just piggybacking on what others have talked about, like the advocacy and education, ensuring that the school has those services to meet the needs of these children and unaccompanied minors, and improve their child welfare, address those educational barriers, and combating discrimination, right? We want to include youth in those educational programs. So maybe creating something where those that are not very familiar with the English language, including them so that they do feel included and can learn from these types of groups. And then just supporting the diverse needs of each one of our populations, because even though they may come from Central America, their culture, heritage, and traditions may be very different. So I think that is a lot of what we can do to help with the successful integration.
Dr. Perez, thank you so much. To me, that's the most powerful slide. I just wanted you to go because everything you have just shared with us is extremely important for those of us working in this space. But your last slide here on trauma-informed approach, community-based initiatives, what I like to translate that into the social determinants of health. advocacy and education. Just tremendous. And so thank you very much for that in-depth presentation. Your slides were just extraordinary. Thank you so much. I want to move quickly. We're a little over time. I promised to wrap here in 3 to 5 minutes, so I may talk a little fast. All right. So Q&A, we're going to hop over this, but I'm also going to inspire you to and encourage you to go to our website, and we have a CTA request, as we like to call it, that you can ask us any question about anything in this session or anything in general. And frankly, that's just in our own self-interest. And we just hop to that screen. You see it there. It's on our website. It's called a CTA request. Just navigate to RMTAC.org. It's really simple. And you can just put your name. You'd like to have a 30-minute session with us. We've got plenty of teammates that can connect with you and answer any questions. If I can just digress for a moment, Diana, to the survey code, maybe slide number 43. We do ask you to give us feedback. We can only get better if we know what we can, what went well, and even better if, the survey somewhat tries to extract that from all of you in your participation today. So please snap a photo of this QR code and at your leisure, complete the survey. I will put a plug in. We have a session 2 coming up, same type of theme. We're going to be talking about cultivating support networks and the essentials for integration on June the 26th, 1:30 Central. So I'll plug now our June 26th Learning Community Session 5, Session 2 will be on June 26th at 1:30. And then, it's a wrap, right? Thank you all very much. I love our thank yous in all the multiple languages.
Mr. Ramos,
yes,
I'm
ma'am.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to really, really quickly, thank you so much for inviting everybody. I wanted to give a shout out to the Sunny Glen teams for jumping in and just to let them know, how do they become able to receive all of these invites, because I was able to invite them to this one, but I'd love for them to be invited to all of the trainings and in great interventions and that you guys promote.
Dr. Pettis, that's music to our ears. Let's take that offline, and we will absolutely connect with you. We have a dedicated team. I like to call them relationship managers that will help to coordinate and facilitate that. So they're connected to us in everything that we deliver. So we're happy to do that. Thank you for recognizing that group of teammates of yours. Just in closing here, thanks to everybody, all the participants, all the SMEs for your engagement, your valuable contributions in this learning community. And remember this will be our closing thought. Our collective knowledge is our greatest asset. And so with that, this learning community is concluded, and everybody have a great afternoon.